where are the IPs located where they accessed the servers from the Spanish company. And they are obviously IPs that belong to somewhere in Virginia. So, so it's, but the United States hasn't replied to that either.
Well, and I think too, you bring up a good point about there's no chance that Julian Assange will receive a fair trial in the U.S. And then also, I was wondering if you could just speak to how he's not, really receiving a fair extradition hearing in the UK either.
I mean, every single human right has been violated on this man during the last 10 years. The United Nations says that he has been arbitrarily detained for 10 years. He should be freed immediately, and he should be paid compensation for the time that he has served. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture has said repeatedly that Julian is being psychologically tortured. He's being kept right now under the COVID guise 23 and a half hours a day in one room with a computer where he has to look thousands of files up, where he doesn't have a keyboard because they glued the keys together, and he has a radio. That's the other thing he has. That took 6 months to appear. He doesn't have much contact with anyone. He didn't have visits for 6 months until this week, where Stella Morris and her 2 children were allowed to visit. He was in a lot of pain. He has a stiff shoulder and he has a sprain in his ankle. He's very skinny, and we know that the defense has submitted a psychiatric evaluation which says he's been deteriorating psychologically in the last few weeks. He hasn't had a right to a defense. He hasn't seen his lawyers in 6 months. There's been a superseding indictment that was introduced into the courts 3 weeks before the hearing on the 7th of September. As far as I know, by last week, Julian hadn't even been given so he hasn't read the fucking charges against him. Sorry, I shouldn't be swearing.
It's okay.
Oh, you're fine.
I swear like my mother was a sailor and my father was a trucker, so it's all right. It is.
Yeah, I mean, this is how stark the situation is for him. He has not seen his lawyers via video or via visits, and when they did see him before, it was hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. So he's not had the right to a fair trial. That's not even saying that there's alleged conflicts of interest, and I only say alleged because I don't want to get into trouble here in the UK for talking about a magistrate. But her husband worked for the security services here in the UK, and he profited from companies which were had been WikiLeaks has published stuff about, and his son owns or partly owns a company called Darktrace, which is made up of GCHQ and MI5 and MI6 people. And I understand that previously he worked at Norton Antivirus or something like that, creating anti-WikiLeaks software to detect possible sources before they became a problem. That is what I understand. It's been reportedly. I'm not entirely sure if that's correct. The Darktrace thing, I'm sure about. But yes, I mean, he's being called narcissist by judges.
Right.
And this judge has not reclused herself. She's the boss of the person who is in charge of handling the case.
And let's be perfectly reasonable about this. The magistrate, the judge in charge of the proceedings, Vanessa Baratzer, we refer to her as the concierge for the U.S. State Department. um, because she's gone out of her way to accommodate them while demonizing a defendant in court, like she is part of the prosecution, I guess is the way that I want to put it. For clarification purposes, the head of security for UC Global, the former CIA officer, his name is Brian Nagel.
That's
Um,
it. Brian.
I looked that up real quick. El País has done incredible reporting on this, and the Gray Zone picked up where El País sort of left it, and they've been able to bring a lot of new information to light. So we do need to recognize the work that both El País and the Gray Zone have done on this, because they basically stand alone in it. Stefania Maruzzi has been very good about this too. She was on the vigil here recently. Juan, I because we're all getting ready to go to Washington D.C. to be like the American presence during this hearing. We're kind of up in the air about what exactly is going to happen. We've been hearing that he may be rearrested as soon as he shows up in the court on Monday, September 7th. Do you have any information about that, or is it just kind of nebulous your end as well?
Um, I have zero expectations that he's going to walk out free. That's that's not going to happen. I mean, right now he's still in custody and hasn't been rearrested. He hasn't been arrested. So he's in custody, right? Whatever happens. Sorry, I just want to go back a little bit because
Sure.
you did mention there's two things important to mention about Vanessa Bareitzer. First of all, she's a ghost. There is nothing on the internet about her. I mean, how do you become a magistrate and have nothing, no digital history in the internet era? I mean, this is unbelievable. The only thing we found is that she owns a mansion somewhere in London, and I don't even want to say what direction because I don't want to be in contempt of court. But there's a document out there that people can go and look, and she has a mansion in London, and she wanted to make several houses one big house. And we have a picture of her in her sister's Instagram where she's drinking white wine in a gallery. And there's another couple of cases which are kind of big deal that she's ruled upon, and that's it. We don't know where she's, And then the Declassified UK, who has recently been blacklisted by the UK government, by the way, you should follow that story. Basically made a story there that there is nothing on her, and that the government will not release even stuff that should be public, like her rulings in the past.
Yeah, they in fact they could only find a certain number of cases, but in the cases that they found, she had a 96% conviction rate, and that kind of parallels what Julian would face here in the Eastern District. I'm very glad that you were able to put the clip of John Kiriakou into your doc, because he explains it so well. And still to this day has maintained a kind of a sense of humor about it. But it's very important for people to remember that the jury pool in the Eastern District of Virginia, I believe the number was 85%, are employed by CIA or DOS or DOD or NSA. And then the remaining 15% are related to or familiar with people who work for these national security apparatuses. And there's an idea that circulates, at least in the digital space, that once Julian is brought here, he will somehow have his day in court and expose the cabal and be able to take these people down. And it's such bullshit. the peddling of a fantasy to take the blame off of the Trump administration, who is the administration that is going forward with all of these charges. You can't decouple Donald Trump and Bill Barr from this prosecution unless you've got better mushrooms than me, and you don't. I promise you.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that think that Trump will magically pardon him if he reveals the source of the DNC. Which, first of all, Julian would never do that. Julian would never reveal a source. And if he knew who the source was, he's mentioned that it hasn't been the Russians. That's or a state actor. That's all we know. Going a little bit back to the defense, I mean, it's very interesting that you mentioned that she has been bowing down to the prosecution, but something that is less reported on, which I find very good, is that the defense actually kicked ass in the 4 days of the hearing.
Yes.
They were really good. The prosecution was stumbling and was looking for papers, and they were just all over the place. And they were being really helped by this magistrate, and the defense was making a strong case. So this is something that we should consider as this is not over. This is gonna, and every time there is something bad happening to Julian, it adds up to the pressure to just make it unsustainable. There is a point where this silence cannot be politically sustainable. And we're seeing this. We're seeing it on the Daily Mail, the Sun, newspapers that, people like, usual lefty people would not touch because they are actually starting to support Julian Assange. And every time they publish an article, even though they're not doing investigations, which is what they should be doing, they're positive articles overall. So that's a big win, and there's a shift there, as well as The Guardian. Although there's history there, The Guardian has been good in the last couple of months. What we need is a Guardian doing a research on Baratzer, a Telegraph, Daily Mail, a CNN.
I think as long as we keep Luke Harding out of it, we might have a shot of some decent information. But as long as they put that little shit words in print, we're kind of we're worse off. Juan, I know you have short time today. So do I. I have to drive for the rest of the day. Will you please let people know where they can find your work, where they can find you, and anything additional that you would like to say about the documentary that premiered today?
Maybe I just want to mention that on the 7th of September, whoever is in London should attend the protest that is going to be held outside. That's the first day of the hearing. It starts at 9 a.m. And we should be as present as we can possibly be. Last time it was hard for Julian to even hear what was happening in court because of the screaming of the people outside. And even though that hindered him a little bit, I think it also puts pressure on the magistrate to say, people here are watching. And especially during these times when they can use COVID as a restriction to limit the openness of this case, well, we have to be there and make sure we're witness to what goes on. My work, the easiest way to find me is through Twitter. I'm JL Passarelli, Passarelli. You can look at Guerrilla Pix. That is guerrilla as in guerrilla warfare, PIX. You'll be able to see the documentary there and previous work that I've made. This is the second film I've made with well, actually, this film is of Julian. The film I made in 2013 Julian made it with me about gangs in El Salvador. And yeah, I mean, go to Don't Extradite Assange .com to get news about what's going on. Support Stella Morris crowdfund for legal fees. Just get involved. Tweet like there's no tomorrow, because you know that's all we have, our voices, and our voices must be heard until they're censored, if they are, or we win.
Juan, I just have to say that I think thank you so much for making your documentary, because I think it's so important that people focus on and are reminded about exactly what it is that he's being charged for and why he's being charged, and how important the information was to the public that he released. And I also just want to say, I know, for me, it's so sad to think of Assange's position. And honestly, I can't really do it for even too long. And I just want to say that, my heart really goes out to you and other people who are close friends of his, because I know there's, certainly there are so many big things going on, but that's also I know you're going through a really hard time with that as well. So just, thank you for all the work that you're doing. It's incredible. It means so much, like documentaries like that, to groups like my group in Denver, and I know Action for Assange. We put, the teach-ins out, everything, just anything we can do to help spread the word and raise awareness. It's just, we appreciate that a lot.
Thank you. I feel lucky I can work full time on getting my friend out of jail. And by the way, safe journalism as we know it,
Right. It's not like we set out to do anything big over here, just, to save the life of an innocent man in the future of journalism going forward. Because, we're all a bunch of slackers over here. We are. I got to go ahead and bow out. For the people that are watching that are concerned and have been checking up on me, the wildfires are almost 30% contained. They're starting to let people repopulate certain areas. I won't be allowed to go home for about 3 weeks. And even then, our water pipes have been melted. There is benzene flowing through what remains and in the groundwater. So we have a lot of work to do going forward. But I will, maybe by the time I get back from DC, be able to go back to my house. I'm not entirely sure. But I will see everyone tomorrow. I'll be live on Slow News Day with Ryan from The Last American Vagabond, who is about to lose his YouTube channel because YouTube has decided that he is impersonating himself as a way to get rid of his voice. So look for that conversation. It will definitely be high test. And I love you guys. I will see you tomorrow. And thank you, Juan. Thank you very much for being with us.
Free Assange. See you later.
Free Assange. Bye. Thanks, Juan.
So, because we have some technical issues, I'm going to put us in gallery view so both of us can be seen, so I don't have to jump back and forth.
Okay.
I'm going to just play Juan's documentary, and we're going to wrap up the vigil. It's about 40 minutes long, so we're still going to be going for a while, but feel free to jump off. I'm going to hop off mic and just let the documentary run in the background. But on Tuesday, we will be covering the Bill Binney affidavit. We had a nice piece written up for it, but unfortunately, Josh has some personal life stuff going on, and we're kind of behind technologically, I guess would be the way to put it right now. So I want to thank you very much, Kendra, for joining us. I want to thank Juan. And I want to thank Bill Binney and Daniel Burke for giving us the opportunity to broadcast the AMA that we had out earlier. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigmund, Zigmund. You can find us on Twitter at action_4 Assange. And also you can find both calls to actions for this week, contacting different parts of the UK legal and court system to make sure that Julian's trial can be properly broadcast around the world for everyone, as well as reaching out to different departments of the State Department, Department of Defense, things like that, in regards to Julian's situation, to hopefully educate some members there and get some kind of meaningful action done by our government. But with that, yeah, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. So my name is Kendra Christian, and you can find me on Twitter at edubs13. You can find Denver Action to Free Assange at DNB Free JA. I was really happy to catch the vigil today and be a co-host. Thank you, Andrew, and hi to everybody, all the awesome people in the A4A chat.
Press! Press! I'm press!
I don't care, get down.
I am press.
I don't care, get down.
Okay, I'm down. I'm down.
Get
I am press.
Jail for doing their jobs.
Particular things we can believe in.
Press! Press! I'm press.
I don't care, get down.
I am press.
I don't care, get down.
Okay, I'm down. I'm down.
Get down.
I am press. Please.
We are at an extremely dangerous moment in the history of this country. Donald Trump wants to jail journalists who publish stories he doesn't like.
Do you mind telling me why I'm under arrest, sir? Why am I under arrest, sir?
And he's wielding the Espionage Act like a chainsaw against journalistic sources.
We're gonna find the leakers. We're gonna find the leakers. They're gonna pay a big price for leaking.
Let that sink in for a second. At the same time that the US government is chasing journalists all over the world, they have decided that all foreign journalists have no protection under the First Amendment in the United States. So that goes to show the gravity of this case.
Exactly what it looks like. We're the state simply.
Oh.
Whoa!
Amelia, can you hear us?
Amelia, you okay?
And I'll ask the same question. Will you commit to not putting reporters in jail for doing their jobs?
Well, I don't know that I can make a blanket commitment to that effect. We will utilize the authorities that we have legally and constitutionally if we have to.
It's another attack on free press. Just like Julian Assange, after publishing information that exposed government corruption, Glenn Greenwald from The Intercept has been charged.
The claim the Brazilian government used against me was one modeled after the Assange indictment.
This is a war on freedom of speech, and it's a war on journalists.
The U.S. government is asserting universal jurisdiction to reach over to any journalist anywhere in the world that reports on it in a way that it doesn't like and prosecute them.
Mr. Assange was arrested this morning at about 10 o'clock at the Ecuadorian embassy. This precedent means that any journalist can be extradited for prosecution in the United States for having published truthful information about the United States.
Come on, fire!
First they came for Julian, they will come for everybody else. Our children, our friends.
There is a war on journalism, and Julian is at the center of that. But the point is that what happens to him can happen to any journalist who does his or her job.
How did we get here? The case against Julian Assange started a decade ago, but today it is the case that will define press freedom, and by consequence, your freedom of speech.
This is my philosophical background, how I see this work that we're doing, and maybe one other component, is that while we can all write about our own political issues, we can all push for particular things we can believe in, we can all have particular brands of politics, but I say it's all bankrupt. And the reason it's all bankrupt and all current political theories are bankrupt and particular lines of political thought is because actually we don't know what the hell is going on. And until we know the basic structures of our institutions, how they operate in practice, these titanic organizations, how they behave inside, not just through stories, but through vast amounts of internal documentation, Until we know that, how can we possibly make a diagnosis? How can we set the direction to go until we know where we are? We don't even have a map of where we are. So our first task is to build up the sort of the intellectual heritage that describes where we are. And once we know where we are, then we have a hope of setting course for a different direction. Until then, I think all political theories, to greater and lesser extents, of course, are bankrupt.
In 2011, a secret grand jury was meeting in Alexandria, Virginia, to consider indicting Julian Assange under the Espionage Act.
This isn't about who Julian Assange is, because that's been used so much as a distraction, and I think so much of the negative press about Assange has been exactly about that. It's been exactly about, oh, we'll get people to ignore what the issues are because we'll get them to be distracted that this is not an issue about press freedom. It's actually about an individual. It's not. It's about press freedom. You know, it doesn't matter who the individual was in that position. That position needs to be defended. And in this case, it is Julian. But the role that he undertook is one that absolutely needs defending by the rest of the media.
The Obama administration concluded that there was no way to charge Assange without endangering press freedom. However, in 2019, the Trump administration took a different approach.
In an unprecedented move, the Justice Department has indicted WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange for his role in publishing U.S. military and diplomatic documents exposing U.S. war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. But Assange faces up to 170 years in prison under the new charges, 10 years for each count of violating the Espionage Act.
Julian Assange has been indicted under the Espionage Act with 17 separate counts related to his work as a publisher with WikiLeaks for having received and published classified information. Journalists around the world, at The Guardian, at The New York Times, at Der Spiegel, at Le Monde, also received and published that information, but that's true of journalists around the world all the time receiving information from government, including from the United States government. It does not make them spies, and it does not make it espionage.
Assange is charged with soliciting and receiving classified information. That's what I do for a living. I solicit and I receive information. I ask questions and I hope to obtain answers. Where there's evidence available, I try to get the evidence.
Journalists in the so-called mainstream, in its various forms, are now realizing that it concerns them. They come for Julian Assange, they'll come for you.
All these practices of encryption, helping your sources provide information legally, are important for letting citizens and the world know what's going on. Otherwise, we're dependent on our government to tell us what's up, and I don't think that's a dependable way to get information out to citizens. They won't do that.
Welcome to the State Department. I think we have some interns in the back. Welcome. Good to see you in this exercise in transparency and democracy.
Is that what it is? WikiLeaks is the most extraordinary development in journalism in my lifetime. WikiLeaks meant that everything you read was authentic, was accurate. You could judge it on its face value. There's no journalism, even the best, could never be 100% authentic and accurate.
In 2010, WikiLeaks started publishing the largest collection of US military and diplomatic secret documents in history. WikiLeaks first published a video of 2 American Apache helicopters murdering 11 people in Baghdad, among them 2 Reuters journalists.
This video, alongside maybe the images from Abu Ghraib, are in a sense what the Napalm Girl photo tells us about the Vietnam War. So it captures so many elements of the callousness, the bloodlust, and the horror of the Iraq War.
Light them all up.
202 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire!
if you watch it through, there's nowhere to go after it. You can't be rationalized. It can't be excused.
You don't need to be a specialist to see that US soldiers have been intentionally massacring people.
Come on, buddy. All I gotta do is pick up a weapon.
Even if some of them had carried arms, once they're wounded and out of combat, targeting them becomes a war crime. So it's obvious.
It's Bushmaster 7, go ahead. Roger, we have a black SUV or bongo truck picking up the bodies. Request permission to engage.
Bushmaster 7, Roger. This is Bushmaster 7, Roger, engage.
1-8, engage. Clear. Come on. Clear.
It was murder. 360-degree killing. That was the so-called philosophy of the war. In other words, you killed everything within 360 degrees.
The collateral murder video wasn't an isolated incident. WikiLeaks then published the Afghan and Iraq war logs, nearly 500,000 documents of detailed incident reports conducted by the US that depicted the true cost of those wars.
I'm not surprised by the data. What I am is deeply upset by the data. It's impossible to read the data. When you read about a 6-year-old being tortured to death with a drill, when you read about an entire family being wiped out in a split second because some 18-year-old American soldier has decided that the car was going too fast and just opened fire, when you hear about people being locked in a prison for 2 months and suspended from the ceiling by the Iraqi military, when you read stories about entire towns being decimated or children being killed by Hellfire missiles fired from US Apache helicopters because they were gathering firewood, all these stories are horrific. It's painful.
It is up to a court to decide clearly whether something is in the end a crime. That said, prima facie, there does appear to be evidence of war crimes in this material. An example is the Task Force 373 HIMARS missile strike on a house which killed 7 children. Well, we would like to see this material, the revelations that this material gives, be taken seriously, investigated by governments, and new policies put in place as a result, if not prosecutions of those people who have committed abuses.
No one has been prosecuted for this. We have clear evidence for systematic torture. Again, the whistleblower is the one who's being prosecuted, but not the perpetrators.
For just the third time since he was arrested over 2 years ago, alleged Army whistleblower Bradley Manning was seen by the public this week. His 3-day pretrial hearing wraps up today before a military court at Fort Meade in Maryland. Manning faces 22 charges, including the capital offense of aiding the enemy, as well as violating the Espionage Act, computer fraud, and theft of records. The 24-year-old private is accused of leaking hundreds of thousands of documents to the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks, including secret files on the Iraq and Afghan wars. Manning's attorneys are seeking the dismissal of 10 of the counts.
A few months after, WikiLeaks released Cablegate.
That's the scale of it, a vast leak of thousands of documents from US embassies and other diplomatic outposts across the globe in all those countries. There are stories from every country involved that will embarrass, intrigue, and potentially complicate international relations.
Among the specifics, worries about security at a Pakistan nuclear facility. Concern about alleged links between the Russian government and the mafia, plus allegations and examples of corruption within the Afghan government.
Britain's Guardian newspaper said some cables showed Saudi King Abdullah repeatedly urging the U.S. to attack Iran to destroy the program, and that leaders of other Arab nations referred to Tehran as an existential threat. Those documents
I think for the general public, it was quite a revelation that people who have all the privileges of diplomats actually were behaving like thugs.
Italy's foreign minister calls the document release the September 11th of world diplomacy, in that everything once accepted as normal has now changed.
It was truth-telling of the most powerful kind, most fearsome kind, almost, and of course there was a reaction.
The United States strongly condemns the illegal disclosure.
I think the man is a high-tech terrorist. He's done enormous...
Assange.
Yes, he's done enormous damage to our country, and I think he needs to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and if that becomes a problem, we need to change the law.
The way to deal with this is pretty simple. We got special ops forces. I mean, a dead man can't leak stuff. This guy's a traitor, a treasonous, and he has broken every law of the United States. The guy ought to be, and I'm not for the death penalty, so if I'm not for the death penalty, I only want to do it, illegally shoot the son of a...
He's going to talk about WikiLeaks. You had nothing to do with the leaking of those documents. I think it's disgraceful. You do think it's disgraceful? I think there should be like death penalty or something.
That reaction we now see encapsulated in the almost desperate bid by the United States to put Julian in a black hole and throw away the key. That's what they're talking about if he's extradited.
There is an attempt now, a very worrying attempt in the United States to erect a new precedent, which is that in the national security sector, that any journalist that corresponds with a source is committing espionage if at some time a classified communication is made. If I am a conspirator to commit espionage, then all these other media organizations and the principal journalists in them are also conspirators to commit espionage.
That's absolutely true. Yes, that's absolutely true. I hadn't spotted that. I was so excited by the fact that this conceals the fact they called it air support was a Reaper UAV which proceeded to loose off a Hellfire missile, which most probably ended up with 2 children with shrapnel in the stomach the next day.
With increasing pressure due to the publications, Julian Assange feared an imminent extradition to the US, and in 2012 was forced to seek asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy.
El gobierno del Ecuador, fiel a su tradición de proteger a quienes buscan amparo en su territorio o en los locales de sus misiones diplomáticas, ha decidido conceder asilo diplomático al ciudadano Julian Assange.
Can you hear me?
I ask President Obama to do the right thing. The United States must renounce its witch hunt against WikiLeaks. The United States must dissolve its FBI investigation. The United States must vow that it will not seek to prosecute our staff or our supporters. The United States must pledge before the world that it will not pursue journalists for shining a light on the secret crimes of the powerful. There must be no more foolish talk about prosecuting any media organization, be it WikiLeaks or be it the New York Times.
¿Por qué se dio el asilo a Assange? Assange me parece que entra en la embajada en julio. Casi 2 meses nos pasamos estudiando el caso de Julian Assange. Ni siquiera te puedo decir es que estábamos de acuerdo con todo lo que había hecho Assange. Pero era claro que no había garantías para un debido proceso. Era claro que desde Estados Unidos ciertos grupos tremendamente agresivos, los halcones norteamericanos, querían juzgar a Julian Assange. Había grandes probabilidades de su extradición a Estados Unidos, donde podía enfrentar incluso la pena de muerte.
And so began Julian Assange's 7-year-long stay inside the tiny Ecuadorian embassy in central London.
Can everyone hear me?
Hello, Cambridge, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Andrew. I can see a room.
Bye everyone.
Just nod or wave if you can hear me.
My name's Ed Snowden. I'm 29 years old. I work for Booz Allen Hamilton as an infrastructure analyst for NSA in Hawaii.
29-year-old young man in a foreign jurisdiction that he had no experience with, the subject of the largest intelligence manhunt the world has ever seen. And the realities were, for Edward Snowden, knew he was going to be smashed. And at that moment, he reached out and asked us for help. We managed to get him out of Hong Kong. But when he landed in the Moscow airport, the American government had cancelled his passport.
While all of these news organizations around the world, all of these publishers were trying to get a piece of the story, there was only one publisher that actually said, we want to help the source. We want to make sure he's okay. We want to make sure that no matter what happens, he has somebody on his side, and that was WikiLeaks.
En el momento que pasa Snowden, se cierran las puertas diplomáticas. O sea, eso fue un cerrón de puertas en Reino Unido. Eso cerró las posibilidades de discusión y negociación. O sea, ese fue el precio por la libertad de Snowden fue la libertad de Julian.
Assange was aware of the possible consequences of helping Snowden.
I think that is an important lesson, that actually an organization that specializes in defeating surveillance for national security cases was the organization that was able to do this. Yes, we had some diplomatic contacts and we certainly had the will and the desire to not see another Chelsea Manning, but I think a lot of it, we couldn't have done that if we hadn't specialized in these secure communications techniques.
Despite the increasing threats and deteriorating conditions in the embassy, WikiLeaks continued to publish.
Some of the CIA's most sophisticated and effective spying tools apparently pried open tonight with the help of WikiLeaks. The anti-secrecy group says it's obtained thousands of files.
The CIA is equipped with a variety of hacking tools to crack into phones, cars, computers, even smart TVs.
As a result of these publications, in 2017, the newly appointed director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, in an unprecedented manner, dedicated his first public address to a publisher.
Julian Assange and his kind are not the slightest bit interested in improving civil liberties or enhancing personal freedom. They have pretended America's First Amendment freedoms shield them from justice. They may have believed that, but they are wrong. WikiLeaks walks like a hostile intelligence service and talks like a hostile intelligence service.
The private security company UC Global, hired by Ecuador to protect Assange, cut a deal with the CIA to spy on Assange and the Ecuadorian diplomats.
Together with these is the immediate accessibility to the newest major exposition, convention, and meeting facility in the city of Las Vegas.
In 2016, the owner of UC Global, David Morales, flew to Las Vegas to attend a security fair.
As soon as Morales returned from this fateful trip to Las Vegas, he began bragging to his employees back in southern Spain that we will from now on be playing in the first division, using a soccer metaphor, a football metaphor. But they were violating their contract with Ecuador and secretly working for the Americans via Sheldon Adelson.
The CIA laundered payments to UC Global through Las Vegas Sands, a company owned by Trump megadonor Sheldon Adelson.
Una persona que no se identifica me contacta, me llama por teléfono
y recuerdo perfectamente que cuando comienza la conversación me indica: hola, tú no me conoces, pero yo a ti sí te conozco perfectamente. Entonces yo le pregunto: ¿pero y de qué me conoces? Y él me indica: te conozco porque durante mucho tiempo has sido uno de mis objetivos. Te he seguido, te he grabado, he escuchado tus conversaciones, tengo toda tu documentación personal, tu pasaporte. Durante un montón de tiempo has sido uno de mis principales objetivos.
An elaborate plan was set up between Morales and the CIA to install surveillance cameras with audio capabilities and implant covert microphones in strategic places, such as below this fire extinguisher in the embassy's meeting room and behind this box in the toilet. Assange held meetings in this toilet for fear of being spied on.
En lugar de proteger a Julian Assange, se dedicaron en forma absolutamente ilegal, atentando contra el derecho a la privacidad, atentando contra los derechos humanos, a espiar a Julian Assange, cooptados por la CIA.
The CIA's increasing obsession to entrap Assange alarmed a UC Global staffer who blew the whistle when asked to target Assange's family and even plot an attempt against his life.
They came forward and they spoke to our lawyers and they exposed what had been going on there because they had played a part in it. And they said that what their boss had been telling them is that they were working for the CIA and that those instructions about getting Gabriel's DNA, that was coming from the other side of the Atlantic. These instructions were coming from the United States.
It reads like some really terrible spy novel. Plots to kidnap, plots to possibly poison Julian Assange while he was in the embassy. I mean, it's almost too crazy to be real.
And it is real. It's hard for people to understand that such lawlessness is possible. So there's incredible criminality that has been going on in order to gather information about Julian's lawyers and his family and journalists who were visiting him. I mean, it's shocking, and I'm very fearful. I've been in a permanent state of fear for years.
UC Global sent video, audio, and other information about Assange, WikiLeaks staff, his visitors, and the Ecuadorian diplomats to a CIA server. They also recorded Assange's medical consultations and went as far as recording Assange's privileged legal conversations with his lawyers.
When Daniel Ellsberg was on trial for the Pentagon Papers during the Vietnam War, his case was thrown out because it came out that Nixon had ordered a raid on his psychologist's office to try and get information which was embarrassing to Ellsberg. So, of course, that should have happened, and it was right that it happened. Assange has been surveilled by the CIA. That by itself should mean the case is thrown out. There's no chance you can have a fair trial if the people who are prosecuting have been surveying the defendant as he's been having privileged conversations with his lawyers. It's completely irregular that it hasn't been thrown out on those grounds already. I mean, really is outrageous.
I didn't expect to find torture, to be honest. I thought, well, this is, the UK, they've arrested him, they'll treat him well, maybe there's some issues, procedural issues, but I was genuinely shocked then that we found all the symptoms that you would find typically in a person who has been exposed to psychological torture. And in that context, I have to stress that psychological torture is by no means torture light. It is very serious. In fact, psychological torture was initially systematically developed by the Nazis. When they were not able to break resistance fighters with physical means, they developed psychological torture because it was even worse.
He was arrested in April 2019. Within a couple of months, probably less, he'd lost up to 15 kilos in weight. And his brother Gabriel, who I went in to see him with once, was shocked when he held his arm and realized how thin he was. He was subjected to a psyops operation, I would think, It certainly had its effect on him physically and no doubt mentally.
Torture is being used against Julian Assange to intimidate the world, to show them, if ever you get the idea to disclose our secrets and to expose our dirty laundry to the world, this is what's going to happen to you.
I feel like Julian's life might be coming to an end. It's been 10 years, 10 years of breaking someone down, of trying to destroy his life. And it's a well-known pattern, whistleblowers, people who expose the powerful, they destroy them.
Throughout the 10 years that the Assange case has been ongoing, there have been a number of irregularities. The destruction of evidence by prosecutors, arbitrary detention, lack of access to his lawyers, judges with alleged conflicts of interest, mistreatment, illegal espionage, and the political nature of the charges themselves. All this is reason enough to shut the extradition proceedings and the prosecution down, but Assange still faces 175 years in prison.
Julian Assange is now in a high-security prison in conditions which are quite close to solitary confinement, where he is at serious risk of contracting COVID, simply because of an indictment from the Trump administration in respect of publications for which he's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, publications for which he won the Walkley Award for Most Outstanding Contribution to Journalism. That's how stark this situation is.
Come on, buddy. I gotta do is pick up a weapon.
We started by looking at the husband of the Chief Magistrate, Lady Arbuthnot, who's made a number of rulings on the Assange case. We found that her husband was a Conservative Defence Minister. He financially benefited from corporations that had been exposed by WikiLeaks. We then did an investigation of her son, who is a cybersecurity expert and the vice president of a private equity group. And we found that this private equity group was heavily invested in a firm called Darktrace, which was set up by the British intelligence establishment. So huge conflicts of interest. She has never recused herself in the case, which is irregular in itself, because I've talked to lawyers who have said if there's any hint of conflict of interest, judges will recuse themselves very early on, but she never has.
It's just constant. It's constant. Yeah. We've had this issue before with Belmarsh as well. Apparently they didn't know about the booth.
So this is a constant problem. Whether I'll turn up for a prison visit with him down at the prison and they won't have brought him out, which means I sit there on my own for an hour while he's coming in, or while we're coming into the prison, there's delays getting in because there's huge queues and security's not working properly. So I don't actually get in to see him until half an hour after the actual visit time has started, and he's sitting there on his own wondering whether anyone's turning up. And it just means that a 2-hour visit ends up being only an hour or less, and we lose time. And so, or we turn up to court being told that we'll have the whole day with him, and instead when we get there we're told, no, actually there's no facilities, you can only have an hour with him. And this has been constant for months and months and months on end, which has really limited our ability to get through any of the evidence with him. This is a hugely complicated case with a huge amount of evidence to get through.
Assange is a symbol, really, of the American state's affront at having its secrets put out in the public domain. You know, that's what it comes down to, and it's why I think of it as a political case. He's been blamed for a whole series of things which are patently untrue, but the impetus behind the extradition request has not stopped, which tells you it wasn't to do with those things. It's about high politics and him being a symbol of what they see as an assault on the American state. But most of the rest of the world will see as legitimate journalism.
Now, what makes you think Julian Assange is going to get justice in the United States, in a court in East Virginia, where the jury is selected from a population where 85% are employed by CIA, NSA, DOD, or DOS?
I hired O.J. Simpson's jury consultant in my case.
He has never lost a case. He represented O.J. Simpson and William Kennedy Smith and George Zimmerman in the Trayvon Martin case. He's a winner. And we got him a security clearance. He came to Washington and he reviewed all the documents. And at the end of it, he said to me, if we were in any other district in America besides the Eastern District of Virginia, I would say, let's go for it. We're going to win. But the Eastern District of Virginia, he said, your jury would be made up of people from the CIA, the FBI, the Pentagon, the Department of Homeland Security, and intelligence community contractors, or their family members. He said, you don't stand a chance in the Eastern District of Virginia. That's why they charged you there. I fear the same thing for Julian, that they charged him in the Eastern District of Virginia because it's called the espionage court, because no national security defendant has ever won a case there.
And when we see now how the British judiciary, who has a long tradition of rule of law, a proud tradition of that, has delivered a complete travesty of a trial, where the defendant has not had the right to prepare his defense, where he has not had access to his own lawyers, where we have court judges refusing to consider objections for conflicts of interest. Even in the UK, he's not going to get a fair extradition trial. So this is no longer in the hands of the judiciary. The judiciary is unwilling or unable to deal with this according to the rule of law. This is now in the hands of the public and in the hands of the media to inform the public about what is going on.
Free Julian Assange!
On February the 24th, 2020, the first part of Julian Assange's extradition hearing took place.
I'm here from Reporters Without Borders. We've been monitoring all week. Today we were again concerned about Mr. Assange's well-being, and frankly the treatment is dehumanizing. The fact that he is an afterthought almost. Twice now this week, proceedings have started without a realization that he was not even yet present.
Julian is not receiving a fair hearing. To start with, he can hardly and barely hear what's going on in the courtroom. He cannot communicate with his lawyers without being observed and overheard by officials from the State Department, from the embassy, and from the Eastern District Court of Virginia. So how can he actually have a fair opportunity? And he, as he said, when he was attempted to communicate with the judge, there's been enough spying on the communication between me and my lawyers.
The remainder of the extradition hearing recommences on September 7th, 2020. Due to COVID restrictions, Assange has not been allowed to see his lawyers in over 6 months. On June 24th, the US Department of Justice published a replacement superseding indictment on its website, but it was only delivered to the court 3.5 weeks before the hearing and after the deadline to present new evidence had come and gone. This left Assange and his defense team with little time to adequately prepare a defense. Facing 175 years in prison, Julian Assange will likely not see his lawyers until the day of the hearing.
This is not about left or right in politics. We can unite on this. Please tell everybody that you know that they have to side with Assange and fight against the extradition. If they tell you, I would rather fight for the environment or against animal cruelty or gender equality, tell them they are about to take every right away from you. You will not be able to fight for any other cause. We are talking about the fundamentals here. We must fight against the extradition. We must save Julian Assange.